Emily, I'm so excited to welcome you to the Writer Center virtual craft chat series, where we talk to authors a little less about what they wrote and a little more about how they wrote it. I'm thrilled to have Emily St. James here with us tonight to celebrate her debut novel, Woodworking. And Emily, I would love it if you would start us off with reading, just get a taste. If you haven't bought the book yet, which you should, Emily's going to show you what you're going to get.
Yes. Hi. So we'll talk a lot about this. It's so nice to see everyone. It's so nice to have that you're all here for this on a Thursday evening. The book we're going to talk about is told in alternating voices of a 35-year-old woman named Erica and a 17-year-old woman named Abigail. I'm reading a little bit from Abigail's first chapter where she thinks about a boy she has a crush on. A list of facts about Caleb Daniels, who I have sex with sometimes. He's very hot. These are his best features: his eyes, his laugh, the way he chews on his lip, the way he'll lock eyes with you when you've almost given up on him, remembering you're there, that little divot in his back that looks like you should be able to put a quarter in it, the way that his body seems to exist for the perfect amount of space and then just stops. He's adopted from China a thing he calls a miracle in a tone of voice that makes me think he has concerns he's not sharing. His parents adopted him from some orphanage. This is probably a good thing for him because if Mr. and Mrs. Daniels could have had babies, they would have given birth to a bunch of unblinking hawks. And as mentioned, Caleb is really fucking hot. When he comes, he turns his face away. There's a picture of him and some blonde girl at prom sitting on his dresser, and I think he would tell you he's looking at that, but I would tell you, more accurately, that he's just not looking at me. After we're done, he usually cries and talks about how he's an awful person, and I have to say he's not awful, even though I'm feeling terrible myself. Then he looks at me and says, I'm not gay. One time I said, fellas, is it gay to like girls? But he didn't entirely take it in stride. I should have stopped hooking up with him after that, but he's really fucking hot. I would tell you how we met, but that's the kind of thing a girlfriend tells you about her boyfriend, and Caleb Daniels has made it very clear that he doesn't see me as girlfriend material. In the end, Caleb Daniels can only ever see my penis. Those are some facts about Caleb Daniels, who I have sex with sometimes. We'll leave it there.
Thank you for reading that. So I want to jump in with a Writer Center classic question. So, in your own words, who the heck are you?
I am Emily. I'm Emily St. James. I grew up in rural South Dakota, which is the setting for this book. I moved to Los Angeles many years ago, and to sort of make it as a TV writer, and instead became a TV critic for a long time and journalist, and now wrote this book. And I'm also I'm a writer for television. Most recently, I wrote on the third season of Yellowjackets, but I got some other fun stuff coming up. Yeah, that's who I am. I don't know. It's very boring, isn't it? I just talked about my career. I also like, I don't know, music.
Music, yay, music.
Hooray. Yeah.
All right, so let's dig into to talking about this book. Let's start by talking a little bit about structure. So as you said in the intro, it's multiple voices, which is multiple points of view, which is do the kids still say it's my jam?
They do
Uh,
now. They do now.
they
You're a
do know.
trendsetter. Yeah. Mhm.
Yeah, okay, okay. My kids are not on the call, so okay. So I really like books with different points of view, and I think that one decision as an author that you have is who gets to handle what scene,
Mhm.
if you know what I mean. Like
Mhm.
an event happens, who's going to tell the story? So,
Right.
if you could first explain to everybody a little bit more about who the characters are, and then how you make the decisions about who carries what part of it.
Sure, sure. So the core of the story is the relationship between Erica and Abigail. Erica comes out to herself as a trans woman at 35. When we start the book, she has sort of just had this revelation. I think in the fiction of the book, I think it was about 3 weeks before the book starts. And she doesn't know, she lives in Mitchell, South Dakota, which is a town of 15,000 people. She doesn't know any trans women other than one of her students, Abigail Hawks, who is 17 and got kicked out of her house for being trans and now lives with her sister in Mitchell. And she is the only other trans person that Erica can talk to. And it's sort of the idea of the book is that it is tracing their friendship basically from when it begins to when it sort of morphs into something else. Not to spoil anything. That sounded weird. But you know what? It's basically about. I found when I was early in transition, I found that a lot of my friendships were kind of transitory. It was a thing where I needed somebody for a little bit of time, and then after that point, it was not as important. So I kind of wanted to capture that experience. But yeah, so the idea was that Erica would be in third person. She's writing to you in sort of a very literary fiction voice, and Abigail would be in first person, and she'd be writing more of a YA style thing. And then those two voices and tones would sort of intermingle and cross over and have just sort of have interesting ways that they could play off of each other. So it is interesting that you like sort of ask which scenes, if I had ideas about which scenes were going to be in which character's POV. And what's really fascinating to me is sometimes it's very obvious. It's a scene that Erica's not present for, or it's a scene that
Right.
Abigail's not present for. You know, Erica and Abigail have individual story arcs separate from each other that like don't work. But like there's a scene late in the book where there's a big confrontation in a parking lot. And I shifted that around a lot. And originally it was all in Erica's point of view. And now I'm like, why did I make that choice? Because it makes so much more sense for it to be in Abigail's point of view. So that was like one of the big things I did, but it really was like trying to give both of these women kind of their agency and kind of let them have the moments when they were most affected be moments that were very important to them. So, for instance, the confrontation in the parking lot, I struggled to write that from Abigail's point of view because it's a thing she's not entirely mentally present for. So I had to figure out a way to filter that into first person, which the solution I came up with is kind of boring. But the originally that wasn't Erica's point of view, and now I'm like, why did I do that? That was a bad idea.
I'm going to respectfully disagree, but
No, I mean like it being in Abigail's point of view is much better than Erica's. And I assure you have not read the early drafts, so
fair, fair. So, for people who might be a little less familiar with points of view, so I'm just going to give an example because I wrote out my notes. Gosh darn it, I'm going to use them. So Abigail, the teen, first person. I squeeze my phone in one hand so hard I worry I might crush it. Erica, we're a little more distance from Erica, who is arguably, more distance from herself. At dawn, Erica gets out of bed. Um, and then I don't want to get into spoilers, but there's another character who's a little late in the game who is second person, as in you come home from school and your father stands up from the kitchen table. So could you talk a little bit about how why you gave each person the perspective and about this mystery character that shows up later in the book?
sure. Um, because the book is about trans characters, it has sort of been written about and discussed as a novel about identity, which makes sense to me. Like I understand why that is the case. To me, it's always been more of a novel about dissociation, about the ways that you become separated from yourself when you are not living authentically. And the title of the book, Woodworking, refers to a term in the trans community, which is, especially in the 80s and 90s, which is trans people would transition to a point where they passed for cis people. And then they would cut off all ties with their old lives and disappear into their new life, disappearing into the woodwork, which is where the term comes from. And a thing that I sort of was like thinking about as I was writing the book is this is a very specific to the trans community term, but it is a thing that everybody practices in some way. There are ways in which you are not acknowledging parts of yourself to get along with society or your family or whatever. And trans just sort of shines a spotlight on that. So I was interested in writing about dissociation, but not just around gender, around other aspects of existence through the trans lens, obviously. It felt to me like Erica and Abigail had different experiences with their own pasts, with how they think about those pasts. And when I started the book, it just felt intuitively right to me that Erica was in third and Abigail was in first. Why? I didn't know, but I was like, part of why you write a first draft is to explore these questions and figure them out.
Right.
So the deeper I got into it, the more I realized that, like, the voice of literary fiction, which again, Erica's sort of broadly in, is a very much a detachment from, just a tiny bit of detachment from the self. There is an element of, I don't entirely understand, it's a way you can write about someone who doesn't entirely understand who they are. And Erica has had this moment of realization, but she's still kind of like trailing behind herself a little bit. So third person, and she starts the book in past tense, like felt like, oh, she's behind herself by about 3 seconds. And that's kind of like what how I approached writing her, because she can see the world around her. She can see, here's what's happening, here's how these people are interacting, and she has more knowledge as an adult of how humans interact with each other than like Abigail does. But she's not as so in touch with herself that she knows what's going on all the time. Abigail, meanwhile, is you're in tunnel vision. When first person I think of as having tunnel vision, there's stuff that you can't see because you're so locked into somebody's point of view. And that, I think, a lot of YA is written in first person for that reason, because teenagers, God love them. I love teenagers, but they have tunnel vision. They are sometimes incapable of seeing anything but themselves. And that's really true of Abigail. And it felt to me like, oh, she has these things she is not looking at in her life. And when you are in her point of view, you're not like, you're able to like be with her as she's not thinking about her parents, or not thinking about how Caleb is not a very good boyfriend, or all of these things that she's just not paying attention to. And so first person felt like a very fruitful way to write about that. And then the second I had those, I knew I was going to do that. I was like, well, what is second person? What does second person look like in this world? And really, the character that emerged from that started as a challenge to myself to be like, what does second person say? And to me, it's the ultimate form of dissociation. You are a person, but you are sort of narrating yourself from the outside. I've been really grateful. A lot of people who are plural, which means that they are somewhere on the spectrum of dissociative identity disorders, have really related to that chapter, because it sort of captures a way that they think about the world without me really knowing I was doing it. And I really have appreciated hearing that, because it feels to me like there is something interesting in having a character who is telling themselves what to do, and then having the person that they're talking to not do it. I think there's a real tension there that I found fascinating to write.
So that is so interesting. I'm sort of splintering in different directions. So, two different, very different questions. Um, One is I'd like to talk to you about how it was to write as a 17-year-old, um, and whether you use sensitivity readers, because I have one teen left who would, grab a device out of my hand and tell me I was doing it wrong.
Mhm.
So I'm interested in that. And then the question of, well, let's do that. And then I want to get to the question of writing in the person in second person of you versus reading it, which I hadn't even
Right.
thought of. So, all right. So let's talk about your experience of writing Abigail and whether you got a bunch of obnoxious teens to tell you what's
uh,
good and bad.
I did not. I didn't run it by any teenagers, unfortunately. I ran it by people who had been roughly Abigail's age in 2016. I was saved to some degree because it is a period piece. It's period piece. It's set less than 10 years ago, but it does definitely feels like one. It's set in the fall of 2016 in the lead up to the election. And so I have friends who are now in their late 20s who were roughly Abigail's age back when the back in 2016. So I some of those folks did read it, and I think they occasionally would catch a thing that felt wrong to them. One thing I found so interesting about writing a teenager is that a teenager in Mitchell, South Dakota is going to be a very different person from a teenager in Los Angeles. They're going to have access to different technology. They're going to have access to like different uh modes of being. When I was growing up in South Dakota in the 1990s, we had the internet, and it was like a thing that we like we had alongside ourselves. But the big fad was CB radio because we were like 20 years
Breaker
out
one
of
nine,
date.
Breaker
Yeah,
one nine.
exactly. So it was really this like interesting tension of writing a character who would feel believably teenage to most of the country while also not like sacrificing, because she wasn't going to be someone who was on TikTok. Didn't exist yet, but there was an app called Musically, which was people were using that preceded TikTok. It evolved into TikTok. So she wasn't going to be doing that. She wasn't be doing a lot of stuff on Instagram either. Like these things that we associate with teens that were just like not in the geographic specificity of my area. So that was another thing I had to think about a lot. Um, the most unrealistic thing in the book, there's two unrealistic things in the book, and the first is that everyone uses iPhones. In South Dakota, they would all be using Androids, but I was like, people just know iPhones too much more than they know Android. So I'm gonna that's that in the woodworking universe. iPhones have strong strong penetration in South Dakota. Anyway, Abigail,
Point. Okay,
yeah,
I was going to say point of order. What? Why?
I don't know, genuinely. Like all of the people I know back there use Android, and I can't entirely figure out why. I'm guessing it's something to do with market penetration when the iPhone first came out. I had an Android for a long time because I grew up there. Anyway, Abigail, the main thing I did was I watched a lot of YouTubers. I watched a lot of makeup YouTube. Because I've written for television, I'm very good when I can get like a voice of a person in my head and like have that be sort of present in a way. So I watched a lot of makeup YouTube of teenage girls putting on their face for the morning. And there would inevitably be a moment in it where it's like there would be a knock at the door and they would turn and they would be like, Mom, and they would be so upset. And what I realized is was sort of tandem. When we talk about how hard it is for adults to write teenagers, often we're talking about technology. We're talking about like, I don't really understand TikTok. I don't want to write TikTok. It's not my thing. So like that's a divide between me and the teens or whatever platform they're on now, or slang or whatever. But I feel like slang is easier to learn. But we're really just talking about that because the emotions of adolescence are eternal. It's always, I'm sick of my parents. I'm in love with someone, and it's the first time anyone has ever been in love with a person ever. It's these eternal feelings. And what I realized was like, if I could capture that in Abigail, then it kind of didn't matter, if I got all the like details of the tech right. But I did my research. I got that stuff right too.
That is so interesting to me. So in my current manuscript, I handed 30,000 words in. I handed it to a friend to read,
Mhm.
and she's like, "You do not understand generations." And like the generational markers of what would this person have known
Mhm.
or experienced or related to.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
yeah, so
I think there's a couple jokes that Abigail makes where I'm like, would she have this frame of reference? And I always kind of had to be like, I had to justify it to myself. There were some I cut because I was like, I just don't think she would know about this. But I did, in general, she's a smart kid. She's surrounded by smart people. It felt to me like she would be semi literate about the sorts of things that like I'm semi-literate about. Like I think one of the things that's a great misnomer is we talk about teenagers as though they can't communicate. We talk about them as though they're like not very good at speaking. And I was a hyperverbal teenager. I know lots of hyperverbal teenagers now. I think what we are mistaking is they don't want to talk to their parents and like that wall goes up. But like when they're amongst themselves, they have these like really rich, complicated conversations and they have really rich inner lives. And like I wanted to make sure that that was true for Abigail. And then also, she was going to have this 35-year-old woman who was like, I want to be your best friend. And that would be like
Right.
discombobulating for her.
Yeah, no, I thought you maneuvered that, beautifully of this tension between a 35-year-old and a teen, and the adult is like, "Hey, you want to tell me how to do this?" And the teen's
Yeah.
like, "No, but maybe."
Yeah, yeah. I was sort of blessed in that all my characters are millennials or Gen Z and like I have a pretty good frame of reference for both of those just because I have lots of friends who are younger than me and I am a millennial myself. So like I kind of had an idea of what that would look like. I'm writing a book right now with an 8-year-old in it and she's not a point of view character, but I'm like I don't entirely know what the kids today are up to. So I've had to do a little digging into that.
8 years old. Gosh, I have no idea. I'm looking around as though the answer is somewhere in my study. Um, nope. So you talked about, and by the way, you can throw your questions in the chat if you'd like, or I can keep going here.
Mhm,
So you talked about, so I've written in first, second, third points of view, um, I, you, he, she, they,
mhm,
um, and I've written in terms of thinking, about the experience I have writing it and the depth I want to get into in terms of the character, but you brought up reader responses
mhm.
to the you, and I'm very interested to hear what if you could talk a little more about like what you heard from readers about using the second person
It's
you, what you heard.
it is general.
Eh,
It's kind of fascinating because of all the parts of the book that have changed. The section in second person has not changed at all. There have been tiny little. It's basically the first draft. There are tiny edits, changing a couple things for clarification. I caught one metaphor that didn't entirely work. It is, but it's basically a first draft. And from the earliest days, that has been the part that people have responded to the most. People really do seem to like it. However, in early drafts, it felt like it sort of tore the book apart. Basically, it felt like suddenly you did not really the story had gotten so big that it became difficult to care about if Erica's ex-wife would fall in love with her again or whatever. Like these more prosaic concerns of these two characters because one of the things I wanted to do with that section was pull back from the immediate concerns of trans community to be like, this is a very old story. This has been going on. Trans people have been trying to live their lives as long as there have been people. And that is the thing I wanted to do in that section. And so suddenly the story had gotten so large that you couldn't make it small again. And that was a real balancing act. The way I sort of people often talk about Abigail will make little asides that sound like she's aware the book is being read, like she's talking to you, the reader. And I love if people interpret it that way. In my brain, she's talking to herself. She's already experiencing a little bit of that dissociation. And you can imagine a version of her who 20, 30 years from now is in second person because she has been so cut off from this other part of herself. And also, there's a section where Erica makes a choice to consider not going forward with transition. And I wrote just a little bit of that in second person. And it was a way to sort of like support the idea that the book was going to expand in this fashion. And then it all kind of hung together. But yeah, the main problem was less with the you section in terms of reader response and more in the Erica and Abigail sections. There's a very old adage in Hollywood that is if you have third act problems, the solution is in the first act, and I that's
right,
almost always true. And like that
right.
was the case there.
right? Corollary, you have a gun in the first act, got to go off by the third. Right. I'm going to jump into the chat with some questions. And then I very much want to talk about your career in terms of the differences in different formats that you've written. But okay, so Jen wants to know, and thank you for putting questions. How did you decide what scenes not to show? Abigail meeting Caleb is one, or the scene where there's a conversation on a porch that we, the reader, are not present for. We're looking at it through a glass window. So
Sure.
that's sort of a high level editorial or mid level or low level. I don't know, just a level
Yeah.
editorial decision.
Yeah. In some cases, it's just that the book is starts when Erica talks to Abigail. That's the inciting incident for the plot. And as such, stuff that happened before that, for instance, Abigail meeting Caleb, is outside the purview of the book. I did certainly did some flashbacks, but they are particularly in the Erica sections because she has a different relationship to her past than Abigail does. Abigail kind of doesn't think about her past, and Erica gets stuck there sometimes. And it felt to me like if a thing happened before Erica talks to Abigail in detention one day, I really need to justify that this needs to be in the book. And we cut a whole mess of Erica flashbacks in the editorial process for that reason. Um, and it's the other question, but then yeah, sometimes it felt to me, I think very visually. I think very in terms of like, what am I looking at? It's like when I'm writing, I'm like looking at a scene playing out on a screen in my brain, and it just felt right to me that that scene described is like a thing we're not entirely present for. But it also felt to me like, yeah, that's how it's in an Erica chapter. That is how Erica will remember this. This is a thing that is kind of sacred that she will kind of remove herself from. She'll know what happened, but it'll be a little bit behind something muffled. One thing that was interesting in early drafts is I did not have Erica come out to anyone on the page until she comes out to her boss, who does not like trans people, and my editors were like, "This is a crazy thing to do. This is like, why are you doing this? It's like kind of suggesting that coming out is scary or should be scary." And I was like, I guess. And I what happened was I realized I've read the coming out scene so many times, and I didn't know how to put a spin on that that would drive character forward, that would add conflict, something like that. And my solution ended up being that Erica comes out to her ex-wife, who's very supportive and lovely. And it was also a big character thing because it was what was wrong in their relationship. It's why they got divorced. Erica could not talk about this thing. So that became a way to do that. But you never see Erica come out to Abigail. That's off page. Like that's a thing that's never been in the book. And to me, like that was just the right call because I've seen that scene a billion times. Granted, not with these characters, but it was something I was less interested in writing.
So I want to jump ahead. I will get back to your other questions, but I want to jump ahead to Bailey's question because I was thinking about the same thing. Is so you've written across a lot of genres, um, journalism, criticism, TV writing, and in particular, given that you're just talking about a scene in your head, how does that? What's the process for writing for screen versus writing a novel? In a few words.
Right. um, Writing for screen is very visceral. When we were when I was working on Yellowjackets and we were talking about that show, we were always talking about what happens, what are we seeing, what are the characters doing. Even if they're having an internal journey, we need to see them actively doing something. You can get away on the
Oh,
page. On
okay.
the page, you can get away with, oh, and there's a section of this book where Abigail just lays in bed for a while. I can get away with that in a book. I could not get away with that on television. And so that's like the thing about plot on screen is actually you can be a lot more adventurous in how jumbled the plot is on screen than you kind of can in fiction. Obviously, I've read a lot of great novels that jumble the plot all up, but it is more work for the reader, and you have to be very careful in how you're approaching that on screen. I can tell a story where the characters are, in three different timelines, and just if someone has different hair, the audience will be like, "Oh, I know that this is 1972 or whatever." And like it's really it is a thing I'm constantly butting up against when writing novels because I like to tell stories like that. But I do think like in terms of plotting, novels don't have to be simpler, but they have to have you have to do more hand holding than you have to do on screen. And that's been fascinating to me to sort of figure out because I came at this backwards from writing for screen. And then this idea, what became woodworking, started as a movie idea. And I was like, I think there's more internal stuff here. Let's see if it works as a novel. And obviously it
Ah,
did. But yeah, it started out as it was going to be a ribald teen sex comedy where one of the teens was trans. That was like literally it. It was one of the teens was trans and it was set in South Dakota. I saw the movie Booksmart and I was like, I should do that where I grew up. And then somewhere in the process of that, I was like, well, what if the trans teen had a teacher who like came out to her? And
okay.
then that relationship was so fascinating to me, but it was also inherently internal. The transition narrative is an internal one more than it is an external one, and so it kind of needed to be a book, and that's how we got there.
Oh, that is super interesting. Okay, so after we finish this Zoom, I'm gonna stop and think about what movies I or shows I've watched that manage to bring internal lives to the screen and not make it boring.
Yeah.
Yeah,
It's
interesting.
it's as I was a TV critic for a long time, and it is
Yeah,
tricky, tricky, tricky to do. But you think about a show like The Sopranos or Mad Men or more recently Succession. Those are shows where those characters' inner lives, and it's just some of it's just you get a great actor and they can sell anything. So
right, right, right. Okay, question. I've read the book, don't want to spoil anything. But could you talk about the fine line you had to walk? Oh, this is interesting. About a friendship between a teacher and a student, which is fraught with potential pitfalls. Erica's the adult and should have Abigail's needs as a child and a student at the forefront. But that line does get crossed. And content warning: it is never icky. It's a friendship. It's tricky. It doesn't get icky. But I did think about that as well.
yeah,
It's
yeah, it's one of those things where there's like three layers to it. The first layer is that I, Emily St. James, the author, have to know there's a transgression happening here. Even if I'm writing it in such a way where I think you get to the end of this book and you assume that Erica and Abigail, this experience was at least not a traumatizing one for them. They had a friendship that was, I don't want to say net positive, but was not terrible. And in my head I needed to know that A, that would be atypical for this situation, and B, it is still transgressive in a way that Erica needs to take account for. And like part of the arc of the book is Erica being like, "Oh, this person maybe has given me some good advice. This person has maybe been friendly to me, but kind of can't be my friend. Maybe we tune in 20 years and Abigail's 37 and Erica's 55 and they can like be actual friends because that's the sort of thing that can happen at that age. But right now, it is a really fraught space. But at the same time, when I was early in my transition journey, I had so many friends who were so much younger than me. And granted, I was like 30s and they were 20s, so it wasn't quite the same deal, but it was very they had vastly different life experiences than me. I had more socio-cultural power because I have my job and all these things, so there were like all these imbalances, but they had been out longer, they knew more than I did, and they could give me advice. And I thought that was such a fascinating thing because uh chronological time and queer time are two different things, and to a certain extent all of this gets mixed up and jumbled. I've been thinking a lot about my relationships I had with teachers in high school and how many of them were I don't want to say inappropriate because they weren't, but edged right up to the line of probably I should not have been this close to this person. And I think it's because I grew up in a rural area. Like there were a lot of times I would want to go to like a thing in another city and nobody could take me. So like a teacher would take me. And in theory, spending an hour, 2 hours alone in a car with a teacher, 1 hour there, 1 hour back, is not a thing that probably should be happening, but like it did. And I don't want to like say that was great or that like that was a thing that I appreciate having happened, but it was real. And I do think that like that is an experience that is I have not I've talked about this a lot and I've thought about this a lot, obviously, and I haven't really ever had when I've done events in like South Dakota, Minnesota, I haven't really had that question because I think this is a more I think the extreme emptiness of rural areas makes that more common, and that's the thing I'm like fascinated by in my own life. But finally, I guess it's kind of the third layer was yeah, I needed to have that moment when Erica was like, "Oh, this is a 17-year-old, and
Right.
she cannot be the person you need her to be." And one of the ways I did that was I built a bunch of supporting characters. And first of all, I made sure that you were not going to be worried they were going to sleep together by giving them love interests who made Erica seem gay and Abigail seem straight. And I think that probably their sexuality is more fluid in both cases. But it was a nice hack so that you were not like, I think they're going to sleep together because you knew that Erica was hung up on her ex and that Abigail was hung up on Caleb, and that was going to be a nice way to keep you from worrying about that. And then they have end up both having very good friends, and Erica's friend is named Helen, and she's in a way you could see her being Abigail when Abigail's Erica's age, and Abigail's friend is Megan, who is so much Erica when she was a teenager. She's very annoying, and I think that that also helped because it felt like um, there was a world outside of their friendship that they could like sort of fall into. Megan actually came out of an early note my wife had, which was like Abigail needs people in her life who aren't terrible to her. And that was Megan, and Megan is now a lot of people's favorite character. She's I said in the notes to the audiobook authors that she thinks she's Leslie Note, but she's actually Tracy Flick, and that's how I've been describing her. I love her so much.
Uh, Question. What inspired you to start writing? When did it start? And I'd like to dovetail that into a little bit of just your own personal history in terms of your vast writing experience,
Yeah,
um, the evolution.
I have never not been writing. My kid, who is 2.5, has started telling stories, and just incredibly like interesting inventive things that I'm just like, where is this coming from? And it's clear like the subconscious is just pulling stuff together. When I was 3, 4 years old, I was dictating stories to people to write down for me, and then I would illustrate them. I was writing and reading very young. I have always been working on something. Some of that is because I didn't have the world's greatest childhood, so I like turned my writing into like a finely sharpened tool that I could use to do anything. But a lot of it is just I love this so much. I love thinking about people and imagining people and figuring out what they'll do. I love being in a writer's room. I love working on a book. I love working on a short story. I used to write a fictional podcast. I loved doing that. I loved my journalism career too. It's a different form of storytelling, but I very much enjoyed it. And it's just always been a part of me. And I will say that woodworking was my first actual attempt at writing a novel. So that was a little bit of a different thing because I sat down one day and was like, "This feels like a novel. I'm going to see what it's like to write a novel." And this kind of came out of it. But I've just always loved it. I don't have an origin story more than I was born doing it, and here I am.
So we had a craft chat recently. Zach had a craft chat recently with Viet Thanh Nguyen, Pulitzer Prize winner, who talked about just who's written in a whole bunch of different genres. It's like, well, I think about the thing I want to write, and then I find the vessel for it.
Yeah. Yeah. I feel that way a lot. I think I've really been struggling to talk about why I think some things are short stories, why I think some things are novels, why I think some things are TV shows. And I really just think it's a question of how much of the action is visual. If it's super visual, then probably it works. It's a screen thing. And how much of it is how much I've been using a metaphor of a solar eclipse where like the essential truth of the universe is the sun and then the moon is in the way. How much of the sun is being blocked? If it's a lot, then it's probably a short story because your scope is very small. And if it's less than that, it's probably a novel, but like that's not always true either. So yeah, I don't know. It's a weird alchemical process.
I was going to say the answer is I don't know.
Mhm, mhm, mhm,
Yeah, and just I mean, people I've interviewed enough authors who would say things like, I know how to write this book, I didn't write know
mhm.
how to write the next book. And once you start writing, you understand you really don't quite know
Yeah. Yeah.
where you're
No, I'm working on novel two right now, and it's I wrote a first draft I thought was this is great, and now I'm working on draft two, and I'm like, oh, I have to change all this. So
Question. You talk a lot about spending time with your characters. Did they surprise you? Were there moments where you're writing, say, dialogue and a scene went away you hadn't plotted? How did you deal with that? And that gets to a thing that sometimes authors say the characters were telling me I wouldn't do that.
mhm.
And
Yeah,
years ago I thought that was an affectation. It's not.
no, it's not. Let's see. I feel like it was really okay. So the moment that precipitates the second person section used to be a character revealing a secret to Erica. And I tried and tried and tried and tried to make that work, and it just didn't. And then I was like, what if she revealed it to Abigail? And instantly it was like, oh, this makes sense. This works. And I don't want to say I was surprised by that. I think that one of the things that a bad habit you pick up in writing for the screen is you keep trying to in screenwriting you do long outlines where you write out what the scenes are and then people offer their input, and it's a huge collaborative process. And by the time you write the final script, if you need to change one of those scenes, you better have a good reason to do it. And in fiction, I don't have that. So but I still have this idea of like I need to force this scene into the shape I think it is. And I've gotten much better at that, especially as I've worked on book two. But yeah, it was a long thing of, oh, I think this is an Erica scene, but it was actually an Abigail scene. And really the stuff that is the stuff where the characters have surprised me is so much more in the little just moments of kindness and empathy they have for each other. I think I ended up being surprised how much Abigail came to care for Erica. Not in the sense like I always had thought the arc would take me there, but I just in the sense of like, oh, she maybe doesn't want Erica to be her best friend, but she cares what happens to her. She wants her to be okay. And that ended up sort of being a good grounding mechanism for both of them. And I was surprised by the depths of the characters in this book of their empathy for each other because I really didn't want to write a book with like obvious antagonists. There is a main character who functions as an antagonist, but you've kind of come to realize that the person she's most opposed to is herself. So,
So something you said about a writer's room sent me off down a little rabbit hole. Um, I'm guessing most of us here haven't been in writers' rooms.
hmm,
Um, a place where people thrash out writing together. And I'd
yeah,
love to hear because for most writers you write by yourself and then you have an editor. And can you talk a little bit about the difference in the processes there? Because that,
Yeah.
I don't know anything about that.
It's interesting because when I'm working on a book, it is a lot of me walking around and arguing with the voices in my head, or being like, what about this? What about this? What about this? Turning a thing, 90 degrees to see which angle it works best. And a writer's room is just that process externalized. It's a bunch of people sitting and talking and talking and talking. I'm in a room right now. I can't say on what show, but it's very early days, and it is. So we're just talking about ideas, and we're just like talking about fun things that might happen, and like, what does this look like? What does this look like? And it's just the brainstorming process from the outside, and it's very kind of weird and fascinating. But then you get to the part of where you're drilling down into the specifics, and when I was working on Yellowjackets season 3, there was an episode that I was writing with my wife and writing partner, and I was like, I think this should happen, and it was in the outline and everything, and I got very attached to it, and then we got to a point where people were like, it kind of doesn't quite work as written, and here's some other ideas, and I like that. What ended up in the episode is brilliant and was their pitch. It had nothing to, I don't want to say, I mean, I wrote it, but it was not my pitch to begin with. And like that was such a great lesson for me because to a certain extent, the author of any TV show or movie is a collective. It's people, not just in the writer's room, but the director comes in, the actors come in, the editor comes in. And like that is a thing that doesn't happen in novels. That makes them very frustrating to write sometimes. But I could have just said whatever I wanted to happen if I was writing that episode as a novel. So that's always in the back of my mind too. Is that like if in woodworking, the characters can surprise me, but also I can be like, no, you don't get to do that.
Okay. I take all that on board, but
Mhm.
and I want to go
Sure.
throwing that into Pam's question, and for working with
Mhm.
beta readers and editors, and how does that compare in terms of other voices getting in your head?
Sure. In television, if you really want to avoid a network note, you might have to have a big fight. In this book, if my editor had a note I disagreed with, I would say, I disagree. And she'd be like, okay. And like, that doesn't happen all the time. Obviously, there will be notes where she'll be like, I just don't think that's true. But you really have to pick your battles judiciously in TV and film. And in novels, it is collaborative in the sense of like what I say is ultimately there's a line in this book that every single editor I worked with, my editor Kaylin Douglas, the editor I hired before I submitted it, basically the copy editor. There were several people I worked with, and every single one of them flagged it. And on the very last draft, to submit to publication, I took that line out and I hated to lose it. And I reached out to Kaylin the next day and I was like, I want that line back in. And it's in the book. And nobody's given me guff about it yet. So I think that I was right. But yeah, that is the big difference is in novels, I do feel like I have a little bit more leeway to be kind of put my foot down. Also, the TV show I worked on, Yellowjackets, and the show I'm on right now, I'm on the very low level. I'm on the bottom rung of the ladder, and so like I have no institutional power. I just come in and I'm like, I like your show. I like to talk about television. Let's see what happens. So that is an interesting experience for me because the books obviously people are like, well, you wrote that, and I'm like, it was collaborative, but yes, it's under my name. And on TV, I can kind of be like, how about this idea? And then the showrunners have to think about it more than I do.
So I was about to ask you, thank you, and I was about to ask you about your path to publication, how you found a publisher, an agent, but inquiring minds want to know what the line was.
Oh gosh. Okay. I thought somebody might ask this, so let me see here. Yeah, it's a bit kind of a pivotal scene for the Erica Abigail friendship, and she is thinking about she's looking at Abigail and seeing her as 17, and it says she looks so small in the coat she wears, one of Brooks, Erica thinks, and she doesn't mean her hair. And everyone, whatever the shade, and everyone flagged that. Everyone was like, how can you mean your hair? And I was like, well, of course, like she, like, this is an affectation she has put on. She dyes her hair all the time. This is a character she's playing, but is not actually her. And I was like, but to actually say that would just feel like it was too on the nose. So she doesn't mean her hair, was how I said that. And everybody flagged it, and I fought for it. And it's in the book. And if you didn't like that line, I apologize, but it's one of the greatest lines in the history of literature. So,
Uh, agreed, agreed. I actually that's one of my ones had a little post-it next to it. So
oh, great.
yeah, yeah, I totally get it. I totally get it, and um, I think it was actually Zach. I don't want to do a summoning spell to Zach to bring him into the conversation here, but I was talking about a manuscript and said sometimes people work, help work with you to polish your work so much that the edges that made it unique get
Yeah.
rubbed off.
Yeah.
So I'm glad you fought for that.
Yeah, and I love taking notes, genuinely. It's a thing I enjoy doing. It's I think some of it is just having worked on for screen and worked with editors at various publications over the years, but I like that I can fight for a line like that and get to keep it.
So tell us your path to publication.
Yes, I wrote the first draft of this in about 3 months in
What?
2020
Okay.
to 2021. This is the thing. I generate this is my wife and I write for television together, and I generate material very quickly. Is it good? Not always, but it comes out very quickly, and then someone shapes it. So she does a lot of the shaping. I do a lot of the generating, and those kind of tend to be our strengths. So that's like why we work together well. But yeah, I wrote this in about 3 months in late 2020, early 2021. I put it in a drawer for 6 months. I took it out. I did some revisions to it. The revisions took me longer than I was expecting. I submitted it to an editor named Lindsay Rebar, Ribar. She's wonderful. You should work with her if you are looking to hire an editor. And this is just to everyone who happens to be here. And she gave me some great notes. I did those. She introduced me to her friend Victoria Marini, who has ended up being my agent. And Victoria actually read the draft of this that I submitted to her and was like, I love this. I don't think I'm the agent to represent this. I don't know what to do with it. And then we had a long conversation because I was like, the fact that she said she didn't think she was the right person for it made me want her to be my agent. I don't know why that was. It was very strange. But we had a conversation, and I was like, I want this book to be a beautiful, well-written book that has literary merit, but I also want it to be a book that a person will buy and read on an airplane. You know, that kind of experience you have where you just tear through a book on an airplane. It gives you all kinds of feelings. And then she was like, oh, okay, I know what you're aiming for. And so we ended up working together. She took it out to a few places, and a few of them Bits and Zando just kind of came in and scooped it up. It was an atypically easy process throughout. I, I really hate to tell this story because it wasn't like there were times when I was uncertain, like when Victoria was like, I don't think I should be your agent. But for the most part, it was pretty painless. And I just chalk that up to good luck.
I'm going to disagree, but we're going to leave that there. We are nearly out of time, and I apologize for not getting to everybody's questions. I'm going to ask you two quick follow-up questions. One is there anything that no one has asked you about your writing that you'd like to share with us? And the
Yeah.
other question
Okay.
is, what's your advice to writers who are just starting out?
Actually, a thing that came up in the chat that I didn't get to is about writing dialogue. And
Happy.
I think that is a skill that a lot of literary fiction could improve upon. I love literary fiction. I read so much of it, and so much of it, the characters kind of talk like their inner monologues. And so, my advice to young writers is to listen to how people speak and internalize it and understand that everyone has a Amy has a different cadence from me, has a different cadence from any of you in this room, and that so much of dialogue is not what is said but the rhythm of how it's said. My hack for this is read it out loud. When you have it done, this is a thing that I've done for television for ages. Sit down with somebody and read it out loud, or read it out loud yourself. You'll hear the places where the words aren't quite right, and sometimes you'll decide to keep them because it's on the page and you can get away with it. You don't have to make an actor say it. But imagine there's an actor who's saying it. Imagine who that might be. Who is, what's their voice in your head? That my second book, the protagonist's voice has the voice of Anya Taylor-Joy. Why? I don't know, but that's just like the voice I have in my brain when I write her. Um, and to sort of go backward to what's a thing that nobody asks, I actually want to call back to something that you talked about earlier with poetry. I think one thing I pride myself on, and I think it's because I come out of screenwriting, is how a thing looks on the page. We've gotten a lot of praise for how we handle Erica's dead name, which is we put a gray box over it. And some of that is just, I don't want you to know her dead name. I don't even know it. Like, I know that it's a gray box. And some of that is like a political statement, I guess. But just as much of it is when you get to a point where she's thinking about uh, detransitioning, you can do a page that looks like this, where I don't know if you can see that. There's like so many gray boxes. It's a visual experience for the reader. You see that and you know a thing is happening just from looking at the page. And that's a thing that screenwriting and poetry will teach you in a way that writing fiction will not. So I think it is always good to think about, like, how does the thing look on the page? But nobody ever asks me that question because we are not often thinking about that. Yeah, it's how can you evoke an emotional reaction in your reader just by the presentation of the paragraphs and sentences on the page is always a fun thing I like to think about.
It's interesting because I saw a lot of people have asked you about the gray boxes for the dead name, and that now talking about that made me think about erasure poetry. But
Mhm.
we're out of time, people.
Thank you. You know what? One last note on the gray box. It was originally a black box, like a redaction, and then we went back and forth on it because it was so black, it like was kind of just jarring. So we tuned it down to gray, and that was one of the great fights I had in the process of doing the book.
I love it. So for anybody who hasn't had the pleasure of reading the book, and I'm giving you the link so you can buy the book and write glowing reviews. Yeah, you don't know Erica's dead name. There's just a gray box.
Yeah. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Emily. This was great. I really enjoyed it.
I appreciated it so much, and check out all the other great programming at the Writers Center. They do so much great stuff.
All right, this is my least favorite part where we say goodbye, but I'm gonna do it.
Bye.
Thank you all.